artists of today are not as good as those artists, well, then I shouldn't be looking at them at all. Because I have a rule with myself. I only look at good art. I don't look at mediocre art unless I'm like in a teaching setting and stuff like that. Why would I look at subpar artists? I wouldn't, which means I would just basically delete Instagram, I would delete Google, and I'd just pull out my history books and travel, from museum to museum, and that's how I would do my study.
You're tuned in to the Creative Endeavor podcast, where we unravel the stories behind the art, discover the paths, struggles, and triumphs of artists who turn their creative dreams into reality. Whether you're battling art block, seeking inspiration, or craving a creative community, this podcast is your go-to source for overcoming obstacles and reigniting your passion for art. This is what we do here. We bring you inspiring stories from creative professionals from around the world. It's real conversations with real artists. And my name's Andrew Tischler. What a pleasure to have your company in the studio once again for this episode. I'm talking to Kimball Geisler, who's a professional artist based in the United States. And Kimball has been blowing people away with his big, dramatic paintings of the American landscape. His brushwork is energetic, it's bold, it's colorful, yet he captures such a realism with each and every piece. I not only wanted to ask Kimball all about his amazing artwork, but I wanted to hear more about the man behind the art. You're going to hear a little bit more of an off-the-cuff conversation here, where I kind of relaxed a little bit more than I do in some of these other episodes. Sometimes I can get a little bit stiff, maybe a little bit nervous, you see, in some of these conversations. So it was nice to just have the opportunity to really connect with another artist and just geek out about the art and go into some of these areas that we've been talking about quite a bit here on the podcast. Things like the art business, things like AI, things like some of these technological advancements that are pushing us in different directions. We get into a little bit of that, but much, much more. So put the coffee on and check out this episode. But before we get into it, make sure you're following Kimball on Instagram. He can be found at Kimball Geisler. I'll make sure I include that in the show notes, and also on his website at kimballgeisler.com. Now, before we get stuck into this episode, I just need to take a quick minute and let you know about the sponsor for the Creative Endeavor podcast. In my studio, I don't compromise on quality, and neither should you. Rosemary & Co. brushes have been my go-to for years, and there's a very good reason for that. With over 4 decades of expertise, they are the gold standard in the art world. Treat yourself to some brushes that will elevate your work. Head over to rosemaryandco.com and see for yourself. This is all I use here in the studio. And not only do they make the best quality oil painting brushes, but they also make acrylic brushes and watercolor brushes as well. So right now, go to www.rosemaryco.com and I will include that link in the show notes. And a huge thank you to Rosemary & Co. for sponsoring this episode. Well, I really enjoyed this episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast. It was such a great conversation with Kimball Geisler. I hope you're going to enjoy it too. So put the coffee on, chuck this on in the background. I hope this fuels the inspiration while you're painting in your studio. Here he is. This is Kimball Geisler, the Creative Endeavor. Welcome to the Creative Endeavor podcast. Pleasure to have you here.
It's so flattering to be invited. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, look, I've been following you for a while. And since I found out about one of these big awards that you had received, and you'd knocked it out of the park with this plein air painting. And since then, I've been looking at your work. It is just so strong, so well composed. Your handle of color is outstanding, but it's the brushwork that just makes me weep. It's just so loose and chunky, yet it says exactly what you need it to say. I feel the material of what it is that you're trying to communicate, the depth of those mountains, the trees. Dude, it's off the hook. It's really top-notch painting. Let's go ahead and again, Apologies. I love starting the podcast here. People that listen to the podcast know this. I love to start off with the story of how did Kimball Geisler find himself right here at this point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just correct you on one little detail in the very beginning there because I don't
Sure.
want people getting the wrong idea. That
Yep.
award that I won,
Mm.
it's the plein air salon, but people don't realize this. It's not necessarily a plein air paintings that are part of that award. So that painting was not an on location painting at all. It's a quite a large studio painting.
Dude, because I was looking at that going, plate air? Are you freaking
No,
kidding me?
no,
How's
no,
this
no,
guy
no,
do
no.
it? Okay,
No,
okay.
and I honestly don't think I'm that good at plein air, to be honest.
Well,
I've
I'm gonna
seen work
sleep a
that
little
you
better
do
tonight.
on yeah, I've seen work that you do on location, and I'm blown away by it. I don't. Sometimes I'll hit a good one, sometimes, but I say it's like 1% of the time. Seriously, I mean that.
Okay.
Like, it's just not that great. Anyway, it's a different topic. So you want so sort of my background.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to hear
Um,
your story. How did this start? How did your art journey start for you, and how did you end up at this point in here?
um, I'll get into all of it, like my training and stuff like that. But
Brilliant.
my formal training. But for me, it's kind of interesting. I wasn't really like the artistic kid in school per se. I don't think so.
Oh.
There was always that kid in class that was like the good drawer and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
it wasn't really me. I think it wasn't until like adolescence when I started to just get obsessed with creating two-dimensional art, I guess. Um, as like a teenage boy or a little bit younger than that, I would find little things that like images
Hmm.
that I enjoyed. I remember like these video game booklets came with a video like a fantasy game. I'm not necessarily a fantasy nerd. I never have been, but I remember there were these pen and ink drawings in this video game booklet, and I remember being like 12 years old and being in school, and for some reason just thinking about that booklet, being like, oh, I want to go home and draw that thing. And I would think for like the 8 hours I was at school all day about like fantasizing about drawing it. And I'd come home and draw it for like 4 hours. And of course it wasn't good, but it was good for a little 12-year-old kid. And so stuff like that, as like a little kid, I would just be really I would take hold of an idea, an image that I'd want to create. I remember it was like those fantasy books. It became cars, and then it became aviation. Like I was really into aviation, drawing airplanes, like World War II airplanes, that kind of a thing. And then when I was later in high school, I took art classes and got introduced to sort of fine art more broadly speaking in a high school way. Wasn't super deep or anything like that. I didn't learn about the great artists, but I learned about basic techniques, and I learned about like painting portraits, like just as such, like painting a head. And I didn't use paint. I used oil, no, soft pastels, like chalk pastels, like
Oh,
cheap
wow.
ones.
Yeah,
And so I
yeah.
did my first paintings with those that were like in full color.
Hmm.
And like when I think I was a sophomore in high school. Yeah. So I was either a sophomore or junior. I won the high school art fair, and with a portrait I did, and that was just like really vindicating for me, or validating or something like that. But I've been thinking about like this idea of like prodigies, and what is that, and talent, like what does that mean? And I do not think I have any talent or knowledge about painting that anybody else doesn't have. But like, if there's one thing that maybe I have that only other artists that I really love have, is that fixation of like spending all day long in class thinking about how you wanted to draw, and then coming home and actually doing it. And
Wow.
when I would draw, it's not that I would get it right in a way that somebody else wouldn't. It's just that I would redo that drawing like 50 times until it kind of got right, you know. And that
Yeah.
it's just that fixation that is like that accounts for like the aptitude, I think. Does that make sense? Am I making
Totally.
sense?
Oh, totally makes sense. I've thought about this a lot as well. Like, what is it that that makes, the greats truly great. And you hear people say, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're talented," and I look at it, and it's funny. I think of it in very much the same way. It's like I don't think that I'm necessarily talented or had ability. The thing that say, and I think this is true, but it's hard because I'm inside my own head. I don't know, um, but I think I just worked at this ridiculously hard. Because when I look
Yeah.
at my old work, I'm like, dude, I sucked. But
Yeah. I know. I know.
I wanted to be so good, and it hurt and it made me angry that I wasn't. And so I'm like, no, I got to
Yeah.
figure this thing out, man.
Yeah. And this kind of like naive, stupid belief that you could make it better, even
Yeah.
though you couldn't,
How
even
dare
though
you?
you couldn't at the time,
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
just weren't that good. You thought
Yeah.
you were, maybe. I'm talking about myself.
Yeah.
Um, it's this naive like belief that, oh, I can do that, you know, and that goes a long way. I feel like.
Yeah. It's it's interesting because, you were talking about drawing the fantasy book as a kid. And wanting to just, when I get home, I'm going to do that thing. I remember the same thing for me. It was dinosaurs, Predator, and aliens, like Giga's
Oh
aliens.
yeah.
And I was doing like Predator getting gaffed by something, and then I was doing aliens exploding with rocket launchers and various things. And my dad, it's funny. I look back at it, and I was like, my dad never stopped me from doing those things. I'm like, why didn't you get me to do some serious art? He said, you were making art, so it didn't really matter to me what you were doing.
Yeah.
You were learning the skills. But I look back at it now, I'm in a blessed position to be able to talk to a few young people online, and I also have a couple of people that I've talked to like here in the studio, and I'm trying to help them and direct them. And I'm seeing the anime, the manga, the cartoon characters, the fantasy stuff, the monsters, the aliens. I'm like, do you want to like do something else? And I continue to think like, what did I wish I could have done back then? You know what I mean? Like if you had an opportunity to go back and say, okay, if I could do this over again, knowing what I know now, really apply myself, do you think you would have gone for classical subjects and dove all in with maybe a more formalized style of training?
Oh man, that's an excellent question. And the only thing that probably would have kept me is I would have been overly intimidated by the subject. Like this is, like
Right.
if you showed me a John Singer Sargent in those days or a Rembrandt, it would have been like, no, you just can't do that. You will never be that good. And I would have been right again.
Mm.
That would have like hurt me. I
Well,
think.
on that, do you think you would have recognized what John Singer Sargent was actually doing at that age? Because I'm
No,
not sure. I'm not sure I
no,
had the maturity to be able to
no.
look at a John Singer Sargent pencil drawing and go, okay, yeah, it's a cool drawing. But now that I've been drawing in pencil for a couple of decades, I still look at John Singer Sargent and go, "There's no freaking way, dude. Like it's just too good."
Exactly. Like, yeah, you have an immaturity at that age that there's just no way you can even fathom what they're doing. But I think that I would have had a naive, just like, yeah, there's no way. I don't even know what he's doing, but I can't do that. And
Right.
I remember seeing good art at a young age and just feeling like, yeah, that's totally off limits.
Mhm.
But these pen and ink fantasy drawings, that's a little bit more dissectable for my brain at the time. And in fact, I think I looked at those same drawings more recently. I did some digging online and I found them. And I think this was a few years ago, but I remember being more unimpressed by them. You know what I mean?
Wow. Okay. So they're online.
I think they were, yeah. Or I found the
Okay.
artist or something. I don't want to name names, right?
Okay.
That wouldn't be a
Okay.
good idea. But
That's
yeah,
that's so interesting. So let's bridge the gap here. So you go from
yeah,
these drawings here in kind of your high school and formative years to what and then winning the award in high school for your portrait. So then how does it start making way for these bold landscapes that we know you for now?
yeah. And your last question spills into this too, because I was introduced to good art in my senior year. A lady that had retired a few years before from my high school as the art teacher was introduced to me by the current art teacher, if that makes sense. And she was a California plein air painter. She is a California plein air painter. Her name's Marie Therese Brown. So she's in out of Davis, California. Even now, I think she's out painting. She's awesome. And she went. My high school teacher went to her and said, "Hey, I got this kid who's showing a lot of promise. You should show him on location plein air painting." And so she did a demo during our one of our class periods, and she painted for us. And her demo, which I remember her not liking it, as I would expect. And it was just a street right outside of our school because we weren't going to get driven somewhere awesome or anything like that. So it was a really mundane scene. I just remember her doing it and me being like really impressed and blown away by it. And so I bought an easel. I bought the paints. I think I bought them all with my own money, which was rare for me in those days. I probably spent like $300 or $400, and then I got a few lessons from her, probably 3 or 4 lessons, and then I went to college, and then I went to the country of Chile for 2 years, and then I went back to college and just kind of lost touch with her. And it was when I went back to college that I took some more art classes, and I kind of had determined that art probably wasn't for me. That I wanted to be a little more practical, find something that made money, and so I was going to be a business major, and then I pivoted to graphic design because that's what people tell you to do when you just decide you're artistically inclined, but you don't know. And I mean, I could go into it. I think it's kind of boring, but I just had a few experiences at school where the school that I went to, it's in the town that I live in. It's called BYU, Idaho, Rexburg, Idaho. And at the time, it had a killer traditional program for cheap. And that's where I happened to be going. And it was funny. I went into that program having been a plein air painter back in California. And I walked into, I don't know, Andrew, how well you know the United States, but Idaho is generally, especially for a Californian, no one even knows what Idaho is. It's
Yeah.
just this rural kind of like
Yeah. I'm Texan, so
backwards place.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And anyway, nobody knows what it is. And so when I came into Idaho, I thought that I knew more about like painting than these people know. And I quickly realized that not only did these people know way more than me, but they not only that, but they were very good. And they ended up being just really, really good teachers. I at school. So I slowly morphed from being like graphic design to, okay, maybe I could be some sort of fine artist, to, okay, I want to be a landscape painter do that for a living. And then I had probably 2 or 3 years of solid study at that school with that intention of being a landscape painter. And at school, I actually only learned the figure drawing and painting it. So I didn't learn formally the landscape. I never took formal instruction for the landscape. That was sort of on my own time. But that being said, all of my teachers knew their way around the landscape very well. And I don't know if you're aware of the artist Alvin Veselka. He's a well-known Western artist, paints cowboys and stuff. Yeah, he's a big deal. He just got into Cowboy Artists of America, I think, last year, which is just a huge honor. Anyway, he taught adjunct, which means part-time, without a master's degree. I have a lot of opinions about master's degrees and academia. But anyway, I got to work closely with him for like 4 semesters and learn about the art business from him because he was teaching art. And it was just awesome. So by the time I graduated school, I was not good, but I understood the art world fairly well, and I knew sort of what was going to be ahead of me. And so I had to deliver pizzas for 2 years or so out of school before I could afford to just be a full-time painter.
Wow, so many tangents I want to go on there. Tell me about Chile. Chile for 2 years. What was happening there?
So I was a Mormon missionary, if you're familiar with that whole thing.
Right. Okay.
That's how I was raised, and so I did that for 2 years, and that was just a total departure from the rest of my life, social life and career, schooling, all of that. I mean, but that being said, it was a really cool experience. I learned Spanish, learned to speak it very fluently, communicate. I learned to teach because all we were doing was teaching the religion,
Mhm.
and I learned to do that pretty well. I felt like anyway. Some people might disagree. I don't know, but those kinds of skills. And then the other thing was I somehow left that with this idea that I wanted to do business and make a ton of money as a businessman.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
I don't know exactly what the reason was for that, but that was my idea, and I felt like I could do that. Maybe I could have. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's super interesting. It's also interesting how many people have come on the podcast recently that had a background in business, and some serious training in business. And I'm always interested in that cross section of art and business. I mean, you did mention something there where you were learning about the business of art. That's something I quite enjoy geeking out about because I'm always looking for another opportunity, another way to maybe make life a little bit easier for myself and hopefully the people that are listening to the podcast. It's interesting how many people, they bring their experiences and stories here to this show. And I always find I come away with something going, huh, that got me thinking. There's something there. But it is interesting because I business and art, they are, they go together quite well, I think.
They do.
So
They do.
some people might disagree, but I find business in and of itself very creative as well, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting. But anything there you want to riff on? Any thoughts coming in?
Yeah, there's a few things. First of all, I don't know that I'm a business guru myself. I'm
Hmm.
interested in it. I like it. I like the money side of art, actually. I I want to be careful that I don't think that that means that I'm callous or I only care about dollar signs or any of that. I mean, I
Hmm.
would just let people look at my work and decide if I'm like motivated by money or whatever. I don't
Hmm.
think I am, but I enjoy the financial aspect of it. I enjoy the pursuit of sustenance for my family.
Hmm.
I feel it's this kind of thing of like putting meat on the table, going out and hunting and putting meat on the table.
Yeah,
That's exciting to me about painting.
yeah.
Um, but I don't know that I have opinions about business and like some things, but I don't know that I can. I'm not one of these people who's great at marketing. I don't have a business strategy yet per se
Hmm.
for making money. Um, I don't know that I have advice that way. But another thing that I could riff on when it comes to this is I've actually had this thought that like I don't think art exists without there being a financial component.
Ooh,
The painting
okay.
that you have behind you that you created, I don't think gets created in 2024 if there's not a financial motive for painting that probably begins in, I don't know, like this year 400 AD or something. I don't know when paintings start to get sold and all of that, commissioned by churches or what have you. But
Hmm.
without the financial component, I don't think you see growth in the world of art and stuff like that. I don't see that being possible.
That's probably true. I mean, yeah, as you say there, like a lot of the art of the Renaissance, that explosion in traditional Western traditional painting, a lot of that was backed by the church. A lot of that was backed by some really wealthy individuals. There was a lot of money flowing around. That's how you get a Tintoretto at that size. That's what makes that possible. He
Right.
was paid. Yeah.
Well, right. And then as the markets change, and I'm not familiar with the history about how things change from like church commissions to like private fine art. I think
Hmm.
it probably has something to do with the Enlightenment or something, and like the democratization of fine art.
Hmm.
But whatever's going on there, the financial incentive for artists to create is a huge motivator. And I do
Mm.
not buy this thing that people say that oh, I create out of like pure passion and money has nothing to do with it,
Hmm.
or if yeah, this idea that like if we lived in a world where there were no incomes and just everything was fine, that we would all be out painting. I think that that's true if we were the same person. But I mean, if you lived in a world where, again, where financial necessity never existed, I don't think you get progress in like any way, honestly. I mean,
Mm.
technology and all that stuff probably doesn't end up, you just won't get innovation without that financial need. And so when you think of things that way, it kind of changes the way you look at it.
I never thought about it like that before, but you have a point. Yeah, that's quite interesting. So let me ask you this. So in regards to the money you're obviously you do have some sort of business sense, even though you're not maybe particularly focused on it at this stage, but there's clearly something there. So what is your definition? Let me ask you this. What is your definition of success as an artist? What's that vision look like for you?
Okay. I mean, the first priority would be like provision for family. Like
Okay.
that's got to be number one. And there's that finance right there. There's the money
Sorry.
side of things coming
Okay.
up first. And I've given some interviews with magazines in the past where they ask you that generic question, what inspires you to paint? You know,
Hmm.
and at least one of them, I answered the guy straight up. I said money. That was the first thing that I said, and that didn't make its way into the magazine. I wish it would have, but yeah. So
Wow.
there's that side, which is,
Yeah.
and I don't mean money for the sake of riches. It's just to provide, and then after that, I would say finding meaning and adding to like the trajectory of this movement that we're part of, something like that. Finding meaning in the work and then finding a way to add to it, just sort of build on things would be success.
Mm.
Um, I can't. I struggle to come. I mean, I could think of things that would be like the opposite of success, when it comes to that. But
Yeah. Well, me too. Me too. I'm asking you that very much tongue in cheek because I know I still have not figured out what that definition is for myself, and so I find myself
hmm,
sometimes either spinning my tires, chasing my tail, just not sure. I'm trying a whole bunch of different things and working out what works and what doesn't. But in terms of landing on a definition of like, if this was really working, what would that look like? You know,
I
and
mean,
from
not
go
to
on.
not to become an armchair psychologist, but like when you finish a painting, do you feel like it's lacking? Do you feel like you're empty,
Every
or do you
time,
feel like every time?
every single
Yeah.
time.
I mean, well, okay. I always say I hate every painting I do, and that's
Yeah,
that's true. I
right.
do. I don't like it. I'll happily get rid of it and never see that thing again. No problem.
I hope people
Maybe
are
that's what
listening
you
right now. This is
maybe
because this
that's
is
what you mean
important what
by
you're saying.
feeling. Maybe that's what you mean by feeling empty. But
Mm,
but what I'm not left with is this sense of like, what am I doing in life? Or I
right.
just wasted my time. And I think and that's kind
Yeah.
of what I meant when I asked you about that. It's like,
Yeah.
I doubt you're feeling that when you finish your paintings, right?
That's wow, man. I've never thought about it in these terms before. Okay, so yes, I'm exactly on the same wavelength with you here. Um, I have that feeling of just going, ah, damn, missed it. All right, we'll get it on the next one. But I never felt like it was a waste of time ever. It always feels like time well spent. And one of the things I get to say now, because I am a content creator, that's just something that happened. Is like, well, at least I have the footage. So I'll put it out there,
Yeah,
even though this is a dog turd of a painting. I will put it out there, and someone's going to learn something. Maybe know what not to
exactly.
do, but there is
Exactly,
that.
exactly
Yeah,
right. So I would say that I don't think you are struggling to find success. I think you found it. You just haven't put words to it yet.
yeah. It's more the definition. I mean, I think maybe looking back, I'd be like, oh, actually that worked. But whenever I'm in it, I can't quite see it. But
Right.
and other people get to point at you and give you this definition, right? So I look at you, I'm pointing the finger saying, well, that's a successful dude right there. Ton of followers online, selling pictures, supporting his family. And the success primarily that I see is in the work itself, because I look at the work and I'm like, damn, damn, dude. Like I'm looking at, okay, right now I've pulled up this image of the waterfall, very powerful waterfall. Let me get the title of this thing. Raging Spring, 45 by 72. That is a monster painting, dude. And let me just ask you a couple of technical things right here. So, how many inches
Sure.
is that brush across? Is that like it looks like you're painting with a 4-inch brush? It looks like a massive brush that you're using here. There's some freedom in those marks.
Yeah, it's a big painting. It's a 45 by 72, I believe. It's been
Yep.
a while since I
Yep.
painted that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of big brushes, but a lot of smaller brushes too. Um, yeah, yeah. I have lots of thoughts about sort of what it means to be painterly and how to do that, how to get there. But um,
Well,
oh yeah, and let me just say something.
sure,
You were
please.
so nice. Your compliment was just so nice and wonderful.
I mean
Um,
it. I do mean it.
I appreciate it. I'm sorry for my blank face, but I've just gotten to a point where I just tune out compliments. They're so nice, and I know people mean well, but they don't do me any good. So uh,
I
yeah,
love
I
that.
appreciate it, but I don't need to hear anymore.
Dude, I don't know. Okay, okay, okay. Look, and I don't mean to gush. I maybe I have the tendency to do that too much, but I really I enjoy getting the chance to talk to other artists about stuff, and I love the art that I see, from so many of my guests, most of them, some artists I've been a little bit challenged, and there's been other interesting areas that we go into in the conversation, but I it's funny hearing you say that because I know I do get that too. And I'm just like, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
shut up. Tell me what's wrong with it because I can actually use that. I can actually change the situation and make it better. So yeah,
yeah.
enough, enough.
I actually don't want to hear. I don't want to hear what's wrong with it either. I know
Oh.
I have enough knowledge. I mean, from the right person.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm sure you would be one of them, Andrew. But I mean, from the right person, yeah, I would. I sure, I'd love to hear your
mm,
feedback. But kind of once I've put it out there, I want to forget about it. Like I don't want. I
yeah.
had this recently. Somebody, I won't say what or what painting, but someone on Instagram did this, and like I've already turned the painting in, and I'm excited about to see if it sells
Mhm.
and stuff. And somebody like goes on and critiques it without me asking for a critique, and I'm just like, this is so useless to me right now. I don't need that. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, oh, thanks for that, guy. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
okay, I'm going to ask you a really lame question here, Kimball. The one that all the magazines and the people are asking you, but I am
Sure,
I am
sure.
genuinely interested in this, and I'll ask it from this perspective, because I have a particular thing that's driving me that only recently I think I've been able to put some words to, but it's very difficult to explain. You see, out in the field for me personally, I have something of a spiritual experience, almost a revelation, almost like a truth bomb that gets dropped. And it's something that you feel it's like a gut punch and you're like, "Whoa, this thing needs to be recorded." Or you'll get an idea that will be an amalgamation of different things that you've seen. You'll slam that together and be like, boom, there's the idea. That's got to be on the canvas. So, I'm seeing something here in your work. There are themes. There's a commonality. There's a simplicity to your composition. When that's coupled with that loose brushwork, I want to know what drives you. So, for instance, I'm looking at this painting of Raging Spring, and there's a certain power to the landscape. So what is it that you're looking for when you're out in the field, or when you get excited about a painting? There seems to be something to your work that's a common thread, a common theme. But how would you explain that? How would you describe this?
Um, There's a lot to go that would go into a comprehensive answer there, but I think probably to answer more specifically what you're after, or what you might be noticing, is form for one thing. I
Mm,
just love form. I don't have that painting in front of me, but I know that the form of that the waterfall makes as it spills over that ledge
so
is
cool.
really interesting to me. So form and shapes, shapes and forms, idiosyncratic. Like object. I mean, I just went to the Wind River Mountains in Wyoming.
Mm,
I've been twice last month actually, and the mountains and the Wind Rivers. I mean, if you want to like show like a picture of Cirque of the Towers, or
mm.
Ross Lake and the Wind Rivers, the mountains there are interesting and they're weird.
They
And
are weird. Wow. I've pulled up a whole
but
bunch of
I just
images here. Yeah.
yeah, but they go on for 100 miles of those mountains, just all these different kinds, and they're beautiful. And so that kind of stuff I really enjoy. But I get it everywhere. You can get that kind of stuff everywhere, even in flat areas with no rocks. People say I paint a lot of rocks, and they're right. I do. I love rocks because they do that. But you don't actually need rocks to do that. You can get it in hills and trees and bushes and
Mhm.
all sorts of cool stuff. So I would say, yeah, having interesting shapes, and then the edges that join all of them and the form that creates is really really important. But I actually think that to get real nerdy about this, form and shape are on a spectrum, and they're opposites of each other. So you can do one or the other, and you can try to find a balance between the two, but you can go to extremes of either one. And I think shape is actually more important in good composition and for just good art. Generally speaking, it's a weird bias that I've come to, but I think finding shape rather than form is more important in your work. So take that for what it's worth. That's my opinion.
Mm, okay. So you're looking for shapes. There just seems to be a pattern the way these shapes interlock across your work. It actually makes your work quite distinctive. So I mean, I'm looking at Raging Spring. I see it here in Winter's First Breath. This giant mountain scene. Let me get the size of this one here. This is cool. This is cool.
I can't even remember what that was.
Winter's First Breath, 40 by 60. I'll share my screen. And
Okay,
give
cool.
give you
Oh
give you a
yes,
look at
yes,
this.
of course.
Here we go. Boom. And you should be able to see my screen right here. Can you see my screen there?
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah. So really interesting. I mean, there's a boldness to this and a simplicity to this. Are you so many of these works, they're studio works, I take it. And
Mhm.
you're probably working from what? Photographs, planar sketches, pencil work, how run us through the process of how one of these comes together.
It's pretty like I don't know how to say it, like impromptu, or it's not overly deliberate. But when I do a large painting, I do want to try to work up from a smaller painting if possible.
Mhm.
And basically every place, everything that I paint, I want to have painted there on location at a minimum, and probably have a plein air study for, if possible. I'm doing. I got asked to do this awesome commission a little while ago. This client was so awesome. They were just like, I want this area, but you paint it the way you want to paint it. I'm like, yes, that's how I do commissions. So
Awesome.
but I told them I was in Portugal at the time, but I was talking to him over the phone, and I said, well, look, for me to be able to do this, I got to go there. I got to travel there, and I got to hike to the spot. And anyway, I ended up meeting them the day before, and then they took me up on a hike, the hardest hike I've probably ever done. Extremely difficult, but
Mhm.
that's the kind of thing that I definitely want to have done before I'm going to take on like a commission, a large painting like that, which this painting is going to be a 40-60. And so yeah, but I'll take photographs. I prefer my photographs to be kind of crappy, like definitely not well composed. I want it to be. I want to have like five or more different images that I can sort of loosely pull from, and then I want to kind of assimilate it in my head slash on the canvas. I don't want to do any photoshopping or anything like that. I want the reference to be kind of crappy, which just gets my brain to have to fill in the gaps.
Mhm.
Photos are good for topography, like seeing and just seeing the objects out there. Beyond that, they're pretty useless when it comes to value and color.
Mhm.
So I'll use photos extensively, but I'm relying so much on my brain to compose and come up with ideas. I mean, that's the majority of it. But like, so for that one, what was it called? Winter's First Breath.
Mhm.
That one I did a plein air of with a good friend of mine, and then I did a larger version of it, and then I did that version. Yeah, that was kind of the process there. And the larger version and the final version were probably a year or two apart from each other. So I grew a lot between them too. That's the fun thing about being relatively new, is like you're growing a lot from painting to painting. So that's fun.
Please excuse the brief interruption here. I just need to take a quick minute and let you know about this podcast sponsor, Rosemary & Co. Brushes. Are you tired of brushes that just can't keep up? Rosemary & Co. has the solution. For 40 years, they've been perfecting their craft, creating brushes that deliver every time. It's the quality and durability you've been searching for. And it was certainly an answer for me when I started using them. I'm telling you right now, it really helped elevate my art and my technique. Discover your new favorite brushes at rosemaryandco.com and take your art to the next level. And not only do they make some wonderful, top-notch quality oil painting brushes, but they make watercolor brushes and acrylic brushes as well. Check them out right now and add these to your art kit today. Check out rosemaryandco.com, and a huge shout out and thank you to Rosemary & Co. for sponsoring this episode. All right, let's get right back into our conversation with Kimball Geisler. So how many years have you been doing this professionally?
2016, 15 is when I graduated. And then 16, I got into my first gallery.
Fantastic. Wow. So you're just starting out, dude. This is awesome.
Yeah, I kind of am. That's how I feel anyway. Yeah.
But at this level, I mean, that you're at already, like that's just so impressive. And of course, why wouldn't it be? I mean, look at the painting. So let me let me ask you some cheeky questions here, or change gears a little bit here, because one thing I love to do
Cool.
is talk about, and drill down into some of the business stuff. We've already covered a little bit of that here, but because I'm hoping that whoever's listening to this, that it's going to unlock something for them. And it's not that they'll be able to apply exactly your strategy or whatever, but it's like, hey, you know what?
Right.
What Kimball said there, that's actually a good idea. I'm going to do that. And you also mentioned something off air, um, that I want to ask you about as well, because to make this work as a business, you have to have some form of focus and discipline, because you don't have a boss breathing down your neck to
Yeah.
make sure that you show up. And you described yourself as having ADHD. I hope you don't mind me saying that. I can cut it out if you don't want me to mention that. But
No, that's fine.
how do you focus, with this as a challenge, but how do you focus and get the hours in that are necessary to make this work, and apply yourself in a business like fashion to sustain this output and derive an income?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a really great question. The shortest answer I could give you is I just happen to be doing exactly what works well with my ADHD. That's
Wow.
that's the short answer. Um, I've seen a therapist some years ago about who basically informed me that I had ADHD, but he gave me a really nice compliment that said that he said, you're really high functioning for ADHD. And I think that that's been true in my life. and that my career and how I do my career is like perfectly engineered around my ADHD, which is something I never set out to do. It's just
Hmm.
something that kind of laid itself out. Um, I would say that the other thing, along with my ADHD, I think this goes hand in hand with ADHD. Is I took a personality test some years ago also, and it said I'm low in conscientiousness, which is like organization and being dutiful, like having grit and getting tasks done. And then also I'm prone to procrastination. These are all problems that I have. I'm not horrible. I know people that are way worse than me, by the way. But I'm not good either. I'm not. I'm like I wish I was much better with these things.
Yeah.
So I've had to kind of figure that out um, before I even took these tests and learned these things about myself. And I talked in Jeff Hines' podcast about this. I think that what I do every day is, I watch my kids during the day, or my one child actually now, until he goes to school, which will be pretty soon, and then I'm going to be a regular full-time artist. But I watch them during the day. I do not paint during the day at all. I won't do that while I have distractions at home. It's not until about 8 p.m. that I get into the studio. And then what I do is I give myself 2 full hours to waste time on my computer, um, doing whatever I want, which always inevitably becomes about looking at paintings and studying. Um, and so I give myself that 2 hours. I call it study time, and that's what it is. It ends up being study time, and I'm just in front of my computer with my painting off to the side that I'll be working on, and I'm just studying my favorite artists and seeing how they solve similar problems. And by the time I'm done with that 2 hours, man, I am like on fire up here. Like I'm in what they call for ADHD. I don't know if you have it or have experience, but they call it hyper focus.
Hmm.
It's this idea that people with ADHD, they can't focus on anything that's mundane or boring,
Hmm.
but when something clicks that they really enjoy, they
Hmm.
can get into that
Hmm.
really incredible flow state. And anyway, so I only will paint for like 2 hours a night, but for the 2 hours that I'm painting, I am like locked in a really good mindset. Um, I'm very happy. I'm very enjoying the process, and there's like zero drudgery happening there. And so that I think is how I overcome what you asked me about.
Wow. Hang on. Okay. So you're painting like on average 2 hours a night?
Yeah, yeah, about I would say maybe a little more some nights, and certainly less on other nights for sure.
That is a paradigm
and
shift for me,
and
dude.
my
That's
output
wow.
is not great though. Like I'm not horrible. I'm able to keep up with 3 galleries and be in some shows. So it's not like I put out hardly anything, but I'm not what you would call prolific yet. I hope to change that down the road, but anyway.
How fascinating. How fascinating. That I'll tell you why that's such a paradigm shift for me because the wheels have fallen off this thing for myself so many times. And you know, people listening to this would be like, "Well, no kidding, because you're mental. This is the because you're doing all this stupid stuff like waking up at 3:45 in the morning and just slogging it out, you know." Um, and the one thing that gets me, like I was talking to Rachel, my wife, about this, and I was saying to her, it's like, you know, I miss you guys so much during the day. Like I'm not there on hand for my son as much as I'd love to be, and I force myself like I take one full day off and just spend that with Hugo, you know, my son, who's 2.5 at the moment, and you know that's amazing. But hearing you go, oh, well, it's just 2 hours, but it's that from what I'm hearing is it sounds like that's what's needed, but really it's 4 hours of work because you're
Yeah.
stoking the fire
Yeah.
for that study time, and it's like
Yes.
boom, let's hit it, and then you've got that. So that sounds absolutely unbelievable. Wow. So you found something that works for you. So this is a myth, this idea that people with ADHD I can't focus at all. Like you can, but it's just focusing on the things that are actually important to you. It's the things that
Yeah,
actually
that's
are of interest. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
that's exactly right. And I struggle. So there's certain things like responding to emails. I struggle a lot with that.
Mm.
Uh, Usually painting deadlines I do fine with, but there's some other deadliney things that like write up a bio and things, stuff like that. I'm horrible with.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, let me say, I now that you're saying this, I think I remember listening to a podcast with you and Jeff Hine. And
Right.
I think I remember you talking about your schedule being totally bonkers.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
stupid. It's
I
still stupid.
hear about no, it's no, but it is no, but it's not. Like I think that I got a good friend who's an architect, and he's the opposite of me. Like he is so good at being just dutiful and on a schedule and like accomplishing tasks, but also having like goals
Yeah.
and just being really regimented and rigorous about things. And I don't know if that I can't remember if that totally describes you, but I can't think that way. I'm so bad at
Yeah.
it.
Well, I too. I mean, I'm bad at it too. I'm bad at it too. It's
Yeah.
definitely not a
Yeah.
strong suit. I think what drives me, Kimball, in all honesty, what drives me is fear. If I'm honest, it does. Like there are so many
Yeah.
things going on and so many things that I find that motivate me. But the one biggest motivator for me is that I'm not going to be able to make this work. And okay, well, let's get real personal here. I'll tell you what it is for me. I'm not going to be able to make this work. My wife is then going to have to go and get a job, which to me it means that I failed because I want to support her totally so that she can be a hands-on full-time mother for my son, and that when she has to do
Beautiful.
that, now the state is going to come in and raise my kid. And I don't know if you're paying attention to what's going on. I suspect you might be. And some other people listening to this would be like, yeah, I don't want my child to be in the hands of the state. And that's not to shame
Yeah.
anybody that does have a child.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not what
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
saying at all. Okay. Don't get it twisted. It's just if I had a choice, that's something that I would like to avoid if possible, because I don't
Yeah.
trust them. I don't trust them. So that's just one
Yeah.
little fear that's stuck into my head because as he's getting older and approaching school age, it'll be upon us in a just moments here. I was like, do I really want to go down this track? No, I'd prefer to have enough income that we have some options, you know. And again,
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't be saying that. I mean, I'm just being, but it is a fear thing. So I look at this and I go, okay, well, I'm gonna have to apply structure. Otherwise, something's going to come in and eat my lunch. It's that old saying, manage or be managed. Choose.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I'd prefer to manage this. You know.
I love everything that you're saying, and I can understand exactly what you're talking about. I think that fear is a totally valid motivator, especially for a man
Unhealthy
who's
though.
trying to pervade. Uh, I know I would disagree with that. I think it's too much. Obviously, is
Right.
unhealthy, but I think that a healthy amount of fear is a healthy thing. Maybe.
Right.
Um, I've had times for sure where like things were looked a little tight there for a minute, and that was really really tough.
Mm.
And that is not an anxiety that I like to live with at all. Like I can't live with it. It's very very tough, but it got me to make some changes and make paintings sell quickly. Get some paintings done and yeah, make some money. I don't know. I can't argue with the results,
No one can.
right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you've got this beautiful studio, and I'm sure you have quite the operation going in so many ways. I bet you it would be amazing to pick your business brain and see the things that you're accomplishing, and if it's fear that's causing that to happen, and you can still be a good dad, which, by the way, is the most important thing,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Way more important, becoming some kind of like big deal in the history books. I mean, then
Oh,
then great.
no, I like, yeah. I 100%. I let go of that. That used to be a huge deal for me, is that I wanted to be remembered. Now I just don't care about any of that stuff. The only
I
thing that
know.
interests me now is how can I impact somebody else's life in a genuinely positive way. And I mean that. Like that's not something that, if it were fake, I wouldn't be able to keep it up for this long. Like I really love people. I love the people that are following, and I love the messages and the feedback that I get, and it is validating to be able to make some sort of difference in people's lives. The people that I'm not making a difference to, they don't hang around very long. They're just like, it's not for me. Yeah, fine. But that's something that really does keep me going as well. So I should balance that out. It's not just fear. There's plenty other good stuff in there too. But yeah, that's the one thing that
Yeah,
does kind of help me show up when I don't really want to. It's like I don't want to wake up at this time. Yeah, but boogeyman. Like, oh yeah, okay, I forgot about the boogeyman. Okay, yeah, here we go.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, one of the things that I fear is a very real fear of losing my mind and having like mental breakdowns, which I
Mhm.
have not really had. But I have enough examples in my life, people close to me that have, people that
Mhm.
are way too stressed out, and
Mhm.
they let that manifest in their family life and things like that. That
Mhm.
terrifies me. So
Wow.
from that perspective, I'm, sometimes I'm okay, like sleeping in, or only painting for a half hour tonight because I'm just sick of this or that, and I
Yeah.
need it. And certainly that can go the wrong way and
Mm.
cause problems, and has to some degree. But I I'm afraid of my brain, my brain breaking.
That's okay. So I've got a I've got a history with this personally. I have people in my immediate family who have suffered with it, some form of either schizophrenia or something, without going into
Wow.
too much detail. But it does have the potential to destroy families and individuals. And
Hmm.
some people in my family have really come up against that in a big way. And I years ago, I was diagnosed with a mild form of depression, and then it was like, well, who in this day and age, though, isn't really. I mean, at
Yeah,
this
yeah,
time,
yeah,
at
totally, totally.
that particular time, it was like, hey, I'm having trouble sleeping, and then asked a few questions. Next thing, I have a diagnosis slapped on my forehead, and he's like, take these
Yeah,
pills. My father
yeah,
at the time said, "Don't take those pills because you won't be painting if you're going to take those." And again, I'm getting
that's
into some
great.
territory here as well because I don't want to, I don't want to shame anybody or make anybody feel bad or anything like that. And
No.
I'm not a mental health professional at all. I'm just an idiot on the internet. Okay, so, but that was my experience with it, and so I never did take anything. But I've been afraid of that too,
Yeah,
of the brain breaking, and I think when I kind of came to the realization that my grip on reality was tenuous at best, I was like, "Oh, far out. Okay, there are some things here. If I get them out of balance, I could go off the deep end. Like
yeah,
if I have too
yeah,
much to drink, I'm not me. I could go off the deep end. So
yeah,
I went hardcore in the opposite direction. I don't drink at all, like not at
yeah.
all. And then, with my health and my diet, like I don't eat any carbohydrates at all, zero sugar.
Good for
Like
you.
I just I don't touch that stuff. But okay, I will check myself. My wife makes some killer chocolate chip cookies, and I will sneak
Oh,
one
baby.
every now and again. They're made out of nuts and xylitol and butter and good stuff, and and there's a little bit of dark chocolate in there. I've got a weakness for those. But there are things like if I don't get enough sleep, if I don't get to the gym and train, then there's something in me that's just like this angry little boy. I've yeah. So I feel what you're saying here. Like but how many examples as well do we have of artists from the past who were just brilliant, but they just couldn't keep it together? They just
Hmm.
couldn't keep it
Hmm.
together, and they just
Hmm.
went off the rails, and
Yeah,
or we look at their work and we're like, oh, their work is amazing. But what a scumbag. The guy was horrible, apparently. Like the stories of Rodin are infamous, that he wasn't, a very nice chap, apparently. So but amazing sculptures.
Well, I know also we idolize in just a slightly different direction. It really is
Mm,
the same thing you're talking about. We idolize like Van Gogh.
mm.
Um, and just independent of what you think about his paintings, there's this idea of romanticizing the tortured, suicidal artist,
Basket
like,
case. Absolute
yeah.
basket case.
And I think that that's a real societal illness that we have, to idealize people like that. And it's not that you wouldn't be sympathetic to the man if you knew him, because I bet you
Mm,
he had demons. And like you said, we're not mental health experts by any stretch, but the idea that we would idealize the tortured artist, to me, is just not good.
mm.
Um, these kinds of tropes, like the starving artist and the tortured artist, they can be true for sure, but like the idea that we want to like start walking down those paths is really dark and kind of disturbing. I don't like that at all.
But it's like what we are saying in the beginning. Like, what made some of these works possible? Like, I remember seeing paintings by Tintoretto when I went to Italy back in 2015. And I was looking at the scale of some of these works going, this is stupendous, like monumental stuff. How is this possible? And it's because certain bases were taken care of. So if you've got like a baseline, right, of just a mental health well-being baseline, and that's taken care of, I think your ability, your capacity for creativity would be so much more than if you were caught in the stress and the tumult of I got to pay the bills. I'm stressed about this. My family's breaking down. My health has gone to the dogs. So just like, you know, having some sort of financial base makes beautiful, great big works of art. That happens on a societal level. I think on the individual level, you take care of certain things, creativity can flourish. I find that the better I do, the more my marriage is on point, the better I feel as a father, the more kind of I get that work life balance, even though now it's still totally out of balance. But the more I work on those things, I find that the painting improves. It does get better.
100%, 100%. And um, again, I'm not a mental health professional whatsoever. Okay, so and
I'll
what I'm
slap
about,
an apology or a warning at the beginning
yeah.
of this thing. All right. So we'll just speak freely, you know.
Well, and what I'm about to say is gonna fly in the face of a lot of stuff. I'm sorry, but
Okay.
I have my fair share of diagnoses, or what have
Mhm.
you, and I believe that they mean something. I'm not entirely sure what they mean.
Yeah.
They mean something, but I kind of feel like I'm actually best helped when I don't just try for mental health per se. Like okay, I need to dive into my brain and dissect what's going on, and like think inward about my mental health. Instead, it's
Mm,
better to look outward and start pursuing something. That's one of the more healing things that I can do. I think that that's kind of in line with what you're saying about like providing for your family. It's like
mm,
that's how I established that baseline of health. And again, this is why I said that the fear I don't see as entirely bad, because your mental health experts will say, well, we need to cut back on the fear and the anxiety, and we need to, and I think that that stuff's actually quite healthy in when it's applied correctly. And
mm.
I don't know if any of that's making sense.
I wonder sometimes though, like, okay, think about it from this perspective. Do you ever think about this? Like our ancestors back in times where we were
All the time I
dwelling
think
in
about this.
caves. Like,
Yes.
think about the anxiety of, okay, if I don't get this bison killed, which is going to be a feat in amongst itself, because that thing could kill you. If I
Yeah.
don't kill the bison with my tribe of dudes here and drag it into the cave, the rest of the tribe they're not going to eat. And oh, not only that, here's another little thing we'll throw into the mix. Saber-toothed tigers are actively stalking you right now. So you got to avoid them and also at the same time get your meal. Like imagine the anxiety that our ancestors would have been under,
Yeah.
you know?
But I see
That
that, I think about that all the time, but like I think that that's a healthy anxiety right there.
mm,
The anxiety we live with today is like, oh my gosh, I'm terrified that I'm going to get fired tomorrow, or I'm terrified that my boss will nag me and be petty with me in the presentation and make me look bad in front of my peers. You know, like these kinds of like really cutting but useless in that kind of evolutionary hunter gatherer sense concerns that we have are,
Mm.
those are not good and they're not healthy, and we're not geared towards these kinds of other anxieties that modernity has kind of created,
Mm.
you know,
So maybe it's a
like
perspective issue we have.
yeah, yeah, possibly, but I just think that the anxiety of providing and surviving is what we're geared for, you
Mm.
know, and it's kind of good for us. And I think like you just see like these like people that live kind of a more ancient lifestyle. They seem to be happy and they seem to not have the mental illness that we have. Strangely enough, you know, what's
Mm.
up with that?
Mm. Yeah. Maybe yeah, wow. Maybe it also could come down to a purpose and a meaning kind of thing. It's like
Yeah,
why are we doing what we do?
yeah. Yeah, and you know, if we could bring this back to art, I have some kind of like thoughts.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm getting way off tangent here. I'm being a little bit more loose and free with this podcast. It's your fault. You're very easy to talk
Sorry,
to, Kimball. Let's
this
bring
is
it back
what's
to the
more.
art.
This stuff's more interesting to me than the art. No, but like I've been thinking about this, and I, I think that's something that has been created. I don't know, in the art world. It's been around for probably multiple hundreds of years, but there's this idea that like art is about breaking down conventions and trudging a new path, like
Mhm.
like starting something new and being different. And you just hear this today. You hear it in our movement. I'm not just talking about like the modernist thing, which is its own set of problems, don't get me wrong, but even within like realism and stuff like that, you'll hear people say, I want to set myself apart, or I want to break new ground, do something new, something different. And I've been thinking a lot about that, and I actually think that like it the new way forward in our movement is not to do new things. Instead, it's to build up and like continue what's been done in the past, you know. And so like
100.
yeah, I think about like my future and what I want to accomplish, and I've been thinking a lot about this. Like, what do I want to be, you know? And it's changed for me a lot, but I think like now it's like actually think I want my work not to look different at all. I want it to just sort of, you know, you think about like artists like Joe Paquette. I don't know
Hmm.
how to say his name, by the way. I've never
That's
met
it.
him.
That's it. Yeah, wonderful guy.
Like,
Yeah.
what would you say about his style, and how unique and different is he? I don't know that you would say that he's unique or different, but
No.
he is just, it's not even debatable. He's great.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Agreed. Agreed.
But
Yeah.
you can't point to a stylistic trait or some convention that he's breaking. He's just brilliant as he is.
He's honest.
Yes.
He's honestly searching
Yes.
that thing which he's inspired by. He's like that surfer chasing the wave, and he's just trying to catch it on each painting. You can see that in the any struggle that he's having. It's a genuine line of inquiry, and it's a conversation that he's having with that subject. And I believe he's truly one of the few authentic artists out there. And I mean there's a lot, don't get me wrong, but I mean he has this authenticity that comes through, and that's why I appreciate his work. And technically it's like
Yes.
some of the moments of light that he captures plein air. I just look at him and going, Joe, how'd you do that? Come on,
I know.
stop it.
Oh man, there's this painting that I favorited of his on Instagram, and I had to even message him and just tell him how floored I was by it. I saw it recently, and I had never seen it before, but
Yeah.
it was one of the best pieces of art I've ever seen. It was amazing. And again, nothing that he's not trying to break any walls down or anything
No,
like that
no.
at all. There's not. I mean, I don't. I hope that this isn't at all offensive, but like if you told me it was some other great artist in history, I'd be like, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's like he's not trying to put himself into the painting as much. It seems to me
yeah,
as he's just trying to let the painting and the nature that it represents stand on its own.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
to me, that's like the way forward
Mm.
in what we're doing. Because like you hear this, don't you hear this all the time now that like realism has nowhere left to go or something like that, or
Oh,
traditional arts has
for
nowhere
sure.
left to go,
Yeah, for sure. Or
right?
painting. Another way of saying that is painting's dead. You know,
Yeah,
and yeah, I've heard all that crap before. Absolutely.
I think it's compelling. Like I think that they make a compelling case, but
Hmm.
I think they're wrong as I've seen it.
Yeah. Okay. So interesting what you're saying. Okay. So for me, I feel like the zenith of painting is kind of Victorian 19th century painting. And there was something happening around that time in so many parts of the world. Australia had its own group of artists. Russia had some incredible painters around that time, 19th century painters. And there just seemed to be something happening globally where a switch got flipped, and it's like, bang! Now we've got artists that we'd recognize, names amongst traditional realists today that we'd recognize. So I feel though now, looking at that, that was the peak for me, and we do have a tendency to put artists from the past on a pedestal. But I'm looking at some of the painting going on now, and I'm looking on
Uh,
Instagram, and just like you were saying, like if we happen to look at a Joe Paquette painting, and if somebody said, "Oh, that's a Singer Sargent plainer," I'd be like, "Of course it is, of course it is."
yeah, yeah,
And by the way, he hates compliments worse than you, I bet. Like
yeah. Fine. I'm not
Joe's one of the
saying
most
this.
talent like it is people I've met. He's
I'm
great.
not saying this to pump him up at all, at
No, no,
all. I
I
mean,
get
and
it. It's
when
genuine.
I
Yeah,
messaged him, I didn't even want to pump him up. I just had to be like, I recognize your greatness. Like it's that
yeah.
simple. Like just anyway,
And
I'm
he
just
was
saying.
like, "Oh, leave me alone." No, no,
Oh yeah,
no.
yeah. He was no, he was really gracious about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
No, he's
can
great.
I say something about what you're
Please,
saying?
please, please, please. Yeah,
First of all, I really appreciate you like giving a date of when you see the zenith as being, because a lot of people are afraid to do that, even,
yeah,
because like you can't do that because art is a sacred thing, or I don't know. But I was gonna, yeah, and I think I see where you're coming from, and I think I probably more or less agree with you on the time frame of when the zenith was, if you look at it collectively. But
hmm,
that being said, I agree that, I mean, I, okay, this is sacrilege, and oh well, I don't care. It is what I think. Like I think Richard Schmid is like just one of the greatest painters of all time ever, of any age.
okay,
Like
yeah,
I there are a couple things that he didn't do as well as others that I could point to, maybe.
right.
But other than that, he did everything so incredibly well
Oh,
that
he was
it's just
awesome.
shocking.
He was awesome. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, undoubtable,
And
unquestionable.
who has ever painted like him and as well as him? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
you could point to Sargent for sure, but it's just different. It's just not the
yeah,
same.
yeah. He definitely had a unique um flair, a unique style, a unique way that he saw the world and was able to distill that onto the canvas. And we
Totally.
get a lot of artists now. It's like, oh, that's very Schmidt-esque, that you
Yeah.
can see they're following in the same line. But he was original in the way he applied it, you know.
And I actually think everybody secretly agrees with me. They just can't bring themselves
There's a
to
lot
say
of
it.
people listening right now just going, of course, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know why not. There's nothing wrong with that. I think Schmidt was an awesome artist. I'm very blessed to have his book here on my shelf, which one of my students sent me. It's no, that's fantastic. But I think in this day and age, like, and I've said this in the podcast before, you hit that little magnifying glass on Instagram. I do this all the time. I hit search and I just start browsing art, and I'm looking at drawings, I'm looking at paintings, portraits, landscapes, still lives, and I'm looking at some of these things and just going, good night. These are some great paintings. Like the hyper realistic photographic, giant faces with where you could see the pores and all that doesn't interest me. But I mean, it's great. It's well done. Keep going. You found a niche. That's your business. That's your model. Whatever you're fulfilled, by all means, go for it. Personally, not my thing. But I love the painterly stuff. So I'm looking at some of this stuff and I'm just going,
Yeah.
wow, could we be right now, and with social media, could we be at a place where we're seeing not only some of the best painting that's ever been produced, but now it's getting exposed like never before. I think the thing that's holding us back a little bit, you thought what you said might be sacrilegious, but what about this? I do think we have the tendency to put artists from the past on a pedestal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've always
And,
said that.
and,
I
and,
agree
and
with
so
that.
and so now you can't doubt the Mona Lisa. Yeah, like the Mona Lisa is a phenomenal piece of work. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't look at that painting and go,
Yeah.
"Wow." I don't like the Mona Lisa. I don't.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I, I
Of
don't I don't
course.
have that as a screensaver. I got Bierstadt. What you got? Mona Lisa? Yeah, yawn. Next. But you see what I'm saying? Like we have the tendency to go,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's great. It's the best." No, Leonardo da Vinci was a fruitcake. I'm sorry. I don't dig it. I don't look at his work and go,
Yeah.
this is amazing. I mean, he was a genius. Don't get me wrong. He was a genius, but he was weird. He was weird. Anyway.
Yeah. His work is, to me, is fine. I mean, when I'm looking at kind of the Renaissance painters, the one to me that gives me more pause is not Van Gogh, Rembrandt. I always get the Rembrandt. To
Rembrandt.
me
Yeah.
is just so
Unreal.
stunningly good. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, I mean, are there people alive today that can beat Rembrandt? Oh, I don't know. That's debatable, but at least it's debatable.
Yeah.
I think you could have that argument with certain artists for sure.
I think we forget sometimes that these people from the past, I mean, they're human beings. They're human
Mhm.
beings. They are, I mean, aren't they? Was there something in the water that made them X-Men? I mean, they're not like freaks. They're human beings. They were a product of the time and the culture in which they found themselves for sure. And there were certain things going on in art. Maybe there was some lost or secret knowledge, but I feel like we put these people on pedestals and then we don't allow, certainly on an individual level for ourselves, but we don't allow, do you know what I'm saying? To even
Yeah.
entertain the thought that somebody could be that good. What's the difference? We're still human beings. Here we still find ourselves reacting to the world, and and again distilling that experience onto a canvas by pushing around colored mud with a stick with some hair stuck to the end of it. Like it's just your way of doing it. But I think the capacity is there for there to be some real greatness, even today, especially today.
We have to ask ourselves sort of the question of what's the utility of this conversation anyway.
None.
In other words, why are you going down this rabbit hole anyway?
No idea.
For like a Yeah. No, I think that there's good reason to walk this ground of, well, are they as good as we say they are?
Mm.
I think there's good reason for that, and it goes something like, um, well, first of all, let me just caveat this because I'm about to agree with you. But for me to be able to agree with you, I have to insert the caveats of like, I'm not under any delusion that these people are not good. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, I'm
Yeah.
not even saying they're not great like
Mhm.
like the history books say they are. They are. Like they absolutely are. You know, we could pick the specific artists and I can sing their praises with the rest of them. No problem. I have no problem, and I study them myself. I absolutely do. But the question is, we're kind of evaluating how they stack up against the current painters of today, and I think that there's a direct there's absolutely utility in that. First of all, in improving ourselves just for the sake of improvement, also for the sake of just having access to more great artists. If you just automatically say that the artists of today are not as good as those artists, well, then I shouldn't be looking at them at all. Because I have a rule with myself. I only look at good art. I don't look at mediocre art unless I'm like in a teaching setting and stuff like that. Why would I look at subpar artists? I wouldn't, which means I would just basically delete Instagram, I would delete Google, and I'd just pull out my history books and travel, from museum to museum, and that's how I would do my study. But the fact of the matter is, those artists are available to me because they're great. And then the other thing is I think that there's utility in the value of weighing in one artist's quality versus another. Um, there's something about comparison that allows room for growth. And again, you have to welcome that and not put the whatever artist on some kind of pedestal. I can think of I guess I won't name names so as not to make people mad, but I can think of great landscape painters whose work I look at, but who I could say, just in a general sense, I could compare them to artists of today that paint in a similar way, but I think that the newer artists are just better. I can do that, and I do that. But I
Oh,
won't name names.
I'm dying to know a name. Come on. We've already pissed him off, Kimball. Come on.
I mean,
We're already
okay,
in the danger zone.
I won't name a name, but I'll say like the California Impressionists.
Yeah.
I think that the California Impressionists achieved a kind of atmosphere and some of the artists, they could do atmosphere like nobody I've seen before, even today, possibly, when it comes to that stuff. But that being said, I find their edge work to be a little bit less interesting and nuanced. And I think had they stepped up their edge work game, and they were impressionists. That's what they were going. They were going for just blobs of color. So I know, like I know that they're trying for something different. But if I'm just gonna say my own preferences, there's certain things that I'm gonna ignore when it comes to their edge work that I'm less interested in.
100%. Was the name escapes me? Was it William Went? Was he one of the
Probably.
California
Yeah.
impressionists? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I do
So
have a
good.
book on the shelf on that somewhere, but yeah, yeah. Okay. Interesting. I mean, he had some interesting things. I mean, very, very Edgar Payne in a lot of
Right,
ways.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Edgar Payne's another one. But
Mm.
by the way, if listeners, I will name a name for a positive. If you want to see some of the best atmosphere I've ever seen, there's some of Hansen Puthoff's paintings that they'll just knock your socks off. I mean, amazing atmosphere. And it's like the kind of atmosphere that you couldn't teach in a classroom because it doesn't follow any rules. It doesn't make any logical sense.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Good night. Yeah, I've pulled up a few of these images here. Oh, stunning. He, I could, I swear I'm looking at Edgar Payne. Who influenced
yeah,
who?
I don't know. I don't know my history that way very well.
Okay. Yeah,
You go to California, though, go to a
amazing.
California gallery and talk to your gallerist, and they'll tell you everything about it. Like, you go
Yeah,
to California and they all know everything about the California Impressionists, and it's really funny how regional things are.
that's so cool. I now I've got a new name for the file. I recognize the work, and I've seen a lot of these, but I didn't name
Yeah,
that name.
yeah,
That, wow, stunning, stunning, very cool. Well, thank you for that one. So I'm going to ask you a stupid question now. Now that we're talking about
yes,
artists, and you're yes, ready for a stupid question. But it seems we're talking about artists and artists from the past. Um, I'm curious, if you had to choose, who would be on your artists from the past, Mount Rushmore of artists that you look at, you find yourself continually going back to, going, oh yes, that's inspiring. I'll try and do something like that in my next painting, or I like the way they did this thing here. Who would be on that Mount Rushmore?
I mean, it's a boring answer, but I think it's just the best art. How many people are on the Mount Rushmore for?
Four,
I mean,
I think
I'd
four.
have to go with Sargent, Sorolla, and Zorn.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, like if you're going with landscapes, it actually changes, and well, I mean, those guys painted some pretty good landscapes. So I don't know, with landscapes, I might that might be subject to change. That they might be people like Edgar Payne and whichever the Compton is. There's two Comptons out there. Do you know the ones I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Edward Harrison and Edward
Theodore,
Thornton.
yeah, Theodore Compton was the father, and Edwin
I
Harrison Compton, Harrison
Harrison
Compton was the son.
is the
Yeah.
son, the son that I think he's just incredible. But there's all these other ones that
Mm.
pop up that I'm like, oh my gosh, and I don't know. I don't know. It's hard.
Your Mount Rushmore sounds a lot like my Mount Rushmore. I'm gonna have to think of some more
Yeah.
obscure names.
Well, who's on yours?
Oh goodness. Well, it depends what we're talking about. Are we talking portrait, still life? Are we talking landscape?
Why don't we
Because
just do a jack of all trades?
okay, okay. Well, I'd have to say, uh, oh goodness, there's too many. There's too many. Oh wow. Yeah, yeah. See, now that the table, yeah, now that you've turned that question on me, I can't even answer that. I okay.
Oh, I got to add Rembrandt to mine, by the way. Anyway,
Rembrandt. Yeah, you're
sorry.
allowed five. You're allowed five on yours. Um, hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I do love Bierstadt for landscape, because I just love his the guts that he had. I mean, he's not the biggest landscape painter in terms of the scale of his work, or the most well known or anything, but he's a huge name, obviously. But I just love the idea of these 10-foot by 6-foot landscapes that people would, pay, like buy tickets to go and see this painting like it was a freaking movie, and then have it unveiled to them. It's like, yep, you saw the painting. The painting came to town, and they went to see this thing, and it just the impact that his work had. I think Bierstadt is undeniable. And I love the themes of his work, and I just the scale of it, and I think he was definitely treading a new path of sorts. And yeah, just appreciate what he did. In terms of portrait, it's hard to go past Sargent, I know, but I don't find myself really looking at a lot of Sargents. I think Ilya Repin has got to be up
Oh
there,
yeah. Oh
you
yeah. I
know.
forgot.
I think Isaac Levitan for landscapes,
Yeah.
but he's close with Ivan Ivanovich Shishkin. They're both right there. Shishkin changed my life, and it just happened to be the painting I was looking at as a 22-year-old kid in Perth in Western Australia back in 2005. I saw this one work that changed my life. That was extraordinary. Um, but yeah, weird obscure names like Jules
Well,
Bastien
what
Lepage.
about? I don't know that artist.
So he
I
did,
mean, I
yeah, he did this
go
painting
ahead.
called the
Sorry.
potato. He did this painting called the Potato Gatherers that's hanging at the National Gallery of Victoria. But he only came up on my radar because I saw the painting. It was just there, and I think this is why it's so important to be exposed to original work by artists. Like, go and look at the actual paintings. Otherwise, we were all looking at similar books, and whatever the editors were like, hey, this person's important, and you'd be looking at them. We'd all have that similar kind of thing. But sometimes you see these these collections that get donated by some wealthy person when they die. That entire collection gets donated. Like in Victoria, again, because I spent a lot of years around Melbourne, there was this thing called the Felton Bequest, and when this guy named Felton he died, all of the work went to the institution, to the gallery, and so now we get this like huge collection of European names, Australian names, massive. And there were some of those paintings that I look at, I'm like, wow, that's a new one. Jules Bastien Lepage was one of those in this painting, The Potato Gatherers. Life changing. Looking at that painting, yeah. So anyway, you
Right.
sorry, you're gonna ask them. So my my
Uh.
my Mount Rushmore's got like 12 people
Oh
on it.
yeah. Maybe I'm racially profiling here, but since you're sort of in that hemisphere, are you into Arthur Streeton at all?
Dude, one of my favorites. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I didn't know if the
Yeah.
New Zealand Australia thing was like wrong for me to lump you in with them or whatever,
Yeah, no,
but
so I no, I was born in Texas. I grew up in Australia. I married a New Zealander, and now I live here in New Zealand.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Gotcha.
I kind of been all over the place, and yeah. But so a lot of my art and art history was whatever was in Australia, whatever I was able to see. Like Hans Eisen would definitely be on my Mount Rushmore. You know, for instance,
Mm, I
he
don't know
paints
that
he
artist, but
painted gum trees. Well, if you like
oh yeah.
put off here or Wendt or Edgar Payne, check out the work of Hans Heisen. It's
Okay.
like oh, TJ Cunningham gave me a great name. I think it was Zugel, and I think it was Hans Zugel, but I forget the first name. But he was like, look at these so this is like Zugel paints gum trees. It's just unreal. Like his trees
Oh
are
my
some of the
gosh.
best trees that have ever been painted. They're amazing.
Collie
Yeah.
Whistson, Collie Whistson taught me what a gum tree was. I didn't even know what one was until
Yeah.
he told me.
Collie okay, okay, speaking of amazing painters, Collie Wisson's up there, man.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
He's
And
great.
completely unconventional and weird in the best possible way. I mean,
Yep.
just I love the way he works. I took a workshop from him years ago, and
Mm,
yeah, I love powerful, powerful dark shapes in his paintings. I mean,
mm,
and his whole method is strange. I can't even describe it, but it's just incredible.
yeah.
I don't know who he learned from, to be honest. Like his technique is weird. The tools he uses and the way he uses them, it's totally unique. So
Yeah.
can't say enough good about Collie.
It's cool. But this is a cool thing. Like he's alive now and you can learn from him.
Yeah, yeah,
Dude, how'd you do that? How'd you do that thing there?
totally.
Where we can't do that with a Rembrandt or a Streeton. You just have the evidence of their work, you know? And
Yeah,
but you
I
could
wonder
still
if Collie is I believe he's totally native Australian. So I
Mhm.
wonder if he maintains like relics of some of those artists through his genealogy. You know what I mean? His genetics, his art genetic history. I wonder if he's retained any of that somehow.
Right. Okay. Maybe. I'll have
Yeah.
to ask him. I have to get him on the podcast and ask him about that. Hey, dude, you got any Streeton
Yeah.
genes?
Exactly.
What's going on there, man? Oh, Kimball, I've really enjoyed this podcast. I appreciate your time so much. This has just been a wonderful opportunity to geek out about art and hear what makes you tick and I really I appreciate your willingness to take on some of these off the wall topics and questions here in this podcast. But what a joy! I would love to do this again sometime.
Oh yeah, it would be so fun. So fun. I
Awesome.
wish it was being done more on podcasts, just riffing and going to weird places.
Why
So
not? Well, thank
yeah.
you so much for being on the Creative Endeavor podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast. And a huge thank you and shout out to Kimball Geisler for joining me. Right now, you can follow Kimball on his Instagram at Kimball Geisler and also on his website at kimballgeisler.com. There's two L's in Kimball, and his last name is spelt Geisler. Check out his amazing artwork there. If you're not already following him, he is definitely one to watch. He just keeps going from strength to strength, and I really love his work. It inspires me to get a little bit bolder, a little bit looser with some of my work. It's just incredible stuff. Now, if you enjoyed this episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast, please do me a huge favor and leave me a rating or a review on whatever audio platform you're listening on. It makes a huge difference to the show for me. If you don't mind, I appreciate that so much. It helps get more and more people to tune in, and it also helps me reach out to bigger and bigger names. We've had some knockout names here on the show in the past, and long may it continue. I've really enjoyed bringing you these episodes of the podcast, and I really do thank you for sharing this as well as tuning in, of course. I couldn't do it without you. Now, If you ever want to see the full video version of the podcast, you can always find that on my online academy. We not only have the audio version, but the video version as well. And you can find that by visiting tish.academy. Simply click on that link in the show notes, and that'll take you right there. And right now, for the next little while anyway, you could become one of our legacy members on Tish Academy, where you could take advantage of the currently low, ridiculously low price that Tish Academy costs each month. And for just a $5 a month membership, you get access not only to the video version of the podcast, but hundreds of hours of painting content. Check it out by clicking that link down there in the description that accompanies this podcast. I thank you for doing so. Okay, I'm going to get out of here and get back to painting. I really appreciate your company here on this one, and I'll see you again in another episode of The Creative Endeavor.